Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Center for Population Change Connecting Generations webinar. My name is Jakub Bijak. I'm delighted to host this webinar today, and it's my particularly great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Tony Champion from the University of Newcastle, Professor Emeritus at Newcastle, whose career was remarkable over the past more than half a century. Tony has became a legend of British population geography, with lots of work done in the areas of internal migration and urbanization, and as to the point that whatever Tony doesn't know about urbanization or internal migration in the UK isn't really worth knowing. What struck me when I was looking, Tony, at your papers is not only how influential some of your work was, especially around counter-urbanization and your work around escalator regions which connect social mobility to spatial mobility, but also there was one of your first papers was apparently at an Anglo-Polish seminar in 1970. On the new towns, which included some of the participants from the Polish side, whom I also know as very prominent names of the time. So, and this was published 5 years before I was born. So this is an amazing career and an amazing track record and of work that has left a lasting legacy in terms of what we know about population mobility in Britain. So we're delighted to have you. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, Tony, to talk today. And to be true to the form, today's presentation will also be about some aspects of internal migration, but this time focusing on students. So Tony, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jakub, for your introduction. I hope I can live up to that billing. And I'm very sorry not to be with you. And I get very nervous when dealing with all this technology from home and so on. So fingers crossed. I'm going to start by talking about the significance of higher education-related migration, just by way of introduction. And we may come back towards the end to see how much of a challenge this is for population estimates and population forecasting for projections. But then I want to move into looking at the results of 2 papers that have been published on this. One, I'll come to that in a minute. One is just an introduction to get your head round what I'm trying to do, and the second paper is a more ambitious one. So I'll get on to the background. Perhaps I ought to have a question mark at the on the heading at the top, into a new migration regime. The background is the massive increase in university participation rates across the globe, and of course not least in the UK, where it's surpassed the Blair target of 50% of young adults, obviously helped by the redesignation of polytechnics and so on as universities 30 years ago or more. So this provides a different context for young adult migration. Always, the young adults have always been the modal age for residential mobility and between place migration. But it's become much more so, especially in countries like the UK that have a tradition of going away to university, which I've just sort of summarized as GATU. I'll mention GATU in different places, so it's going away to university. Now, before mass higher education, the main longer distance moves would take place soon after leaving school, which was often sort of 15 or 16 for many people, and be driven mainly by job opportunities. But now it's a much larger proportion of that cohort that are moving in relation to going to university. I mean, either the school leavers going to university study locally for their degree for 3 or 4 years, And so they move for work on their first job later, sort of 3 or 4 years later than they would have done normally, now sort of age 21, 22 rather than 18. And also with the degree behind them, they have higher level jobs in mind and will be seeking out probably a different set of places and job opportunities because of having a degree, or, which is the main topic for today in a sense, that they move away to university straight from school. And then they have, in their new base at the university they're studying at, they have a range of choices post-graduation, which includes staying in this new place or responding to influences that are different from their home area. Obviously, they can go back home, but once they've had 3 years or 4 years of undergraduate study, they will be thinking differently about their options for work and so on. Now, the justification for this study, so worldwide, the main focus of research on university-related migration has always been on graduate migration. What migration decisions do graduates make when entering the job market? Of course, that's hardly surprising for countries where undergraduates mainly attend their local university and commute on a daily or weekly basis. But by contrast, the researchers in the UK have given much more emphasis to GATU, going away to university, including studies early on, from the 80s and 90s that were looking at how universities were recruiting and competing with each other to get good students. And then, of course, in the late 1990s and 2000s, there's been a great deal of attention to studentification. Darren Smith, Joe Sage, and so on. And so much so that it became the ugly BBC word of the year in 2002. Now, UK attention to postgraduate location migration choices has been increasing since 2000s. But what has happened is that there's been more attention to how the graduates have fared in moving or not moving and so on, than there has been on the impact on the areas that they've moved from and moved to. Also, that swathe of research has been at a quite high geographical level, often just focusing on the regional level, like the southwest and the southeast and so on, rather than the local impacts at sub-regional and local level. And they've often restricted themselves to looking either at the move to university or the move from university to their first job, and doing this separately rather than tracking individuals from their home or domicile, as it's called by HESA, Higher Education Statistics Agency, via the university to the job. And so it's those three that I'm emphasizing in this presentation now. The main focus is therefore on area outcomes rather than graduate outcomes on the local and sub-regional scale, and tracking across 3 time points for the same people, moving from what we call time 1, T1, their home or domicile, to university, if they move, and to workplace. And as I said at the beginning, I'm drawing on 2 papers, that one in local economy, which used the ONS population estimates as its source, mainly based on data for 2019, which tried to estimate the net impact of going to university migration by comparing for each local authority area the numbers of modal university undergraduate age, 19 to 21, with the numbers of 16 to 18 sort of sixth formers in the same area, and seeing how much it changed between those 2 ages, so as to gauge the geographical effect of going away to university. So that was only dealing with the first half of the migration, if you like, higher education related migration. Now the second one, which was published a few weeks ago, this is with Anne Green and Kostas Kolidas at Birmingham, and it uses the Graduate Outcome Survey, which is conducted by HESA every year, 15 months after graduation. So it's usually in October of the following year after they've graduated. And what we're doing in this paper is to track them between 53 subregions below regional level, mainly county level, as we'll see, through the 3 time points and the 3 addresses, or potentially 3 addresses from home via university to workplace. Both sets of results are relevant to policy issues like labour market supply, labour supply, and the government's levelling up agenda, and we'll come back to that towards the end if I leave myself time. So this is the main slide on the first of those papers, the going away to university, which LUA stands for local and unitary authorities. You can just think of them as local authority districts, if you like, lower tier local authorities, as ONS now calls them. Which ones see the biggest gains from school leaving? And so we looked at I looked at the 379 of them across the UK, and Lincoln comes out at top. And the way this is calculated, giving its ratio of 378 over here, is by dividing the number of 19 to 21-year-olds in Lincoln's population in 2019 by the number of 16 to 18-year-olds, which was only just over 3,000. So you get nearly a fourfold increase in that cohort running through from their sixth form into university. And the difference between them, obviously, the result, this increase of 8614 is the net result of those who arrived in Lincoln to study, or they may have been coming for a job, but let's assume they're nearly all moving for going to the university in Lincoln, and net of the numbers of Lincoln school leavers who have moved out to somewhere else to university. But that net increase actually makes up 8.7% of its total 2019 population. So it's a big swelling of the population of Lincoln that occurs each year, basically. And looking down here, we have 9 other districts that had ratios of over 2.5, i.e. 2.5 times the 16 to 18-year-olds, and that caused their populations to swell by over 5%. These are mainly small and medium-sized cities with a big HE presence, so that's why places like, not Newcastle comes out, but and Southampton comes out, but places like Birmingham, for instance, don't quite get into the top 10. So when we look across the whole country of the 379 local authority areas in the UK, just 94 of them had ratios above 1, meaning that they made a net gain from this going away to university process. 3/4 lost out, and that reflects the concentrating effect of going away to university, just that 1 year sample, year before COVID, of course. And it is well-established lines of migration that have been studied by other people. Oliver Duke Williams calls it the student pipeline. Smith and Sage call it the conveyor belt of student migration going to university. And of course, they've studied the studentification impacts from this whole process. And those studentification impacts have grown considerably in many places. So I did the same exercise for 2001. And you can see at the top here that we have over here the 8.7% contribution, which the excess or growth of the cohort contributed to Lincoln's population in 2019, if you do the same calculation for 2001, it's only 2.4 contribution, because Lincoln only started in about 1998 as a university, I think, and so obviously it has grown substantially since then. But it's not alone. Others have got quite considerable percentage point changes in the contribution to their populations. Again, mainly the medium-sized cities. Newcastle there does feature, though, because of the growth of both universities and a degree awarding college in Newcastle itself. So that's one of the larger cities that comes top of the list. Of course, if you're talking about housing impacts rather than just impacts on the social life of these places and so on, the impact is even greater, because the people coming to university in these places are not going to be living in the homes of the people that have moved out of Newcastle when leaving school to go to university elsewhere. So the gross impact is more important in terms of housing impacts that studentification has looked at. Right, so that's sort of an introduction to going away to university, the first arm of the two-arm higher education related migration. So now we're going to move on to look at the whole system from T1 domicile through T2 university to T3 job workplace in 15 months after graduation. And the data, as I mentioned before, is from the Graduate Outcome Survey from HESA. One of the big benefits of GOS, of course, is that it only includes graduates. So the previous data I've got could have included people going to Lincoln to work on leaving school, for instance, but this is just on graduates. Another benefit of the Graduate Outcome Survey is the wide range of variables that are drawn from the student's record that HESA holds, which includes pre-university background, parental background, as well as the school achievement of the individual students going to university, as well as the job details, the job that they're holding 15 months after graduation. And then thirdly is its geographical detail. It gives the full postcode for home. It gives the university campus where necessary, location, and it gives the workplace 15 months after graduation. The only problem with workplace, though, is that in the data set we've got, we only have a very crude geography, basically upper tier local authority geography. So that Greater London is, well, actually that's not upper tier, is it? But Greater London in this data set is treated as a single area, as are the individual metropolitan counties and so on. So it's not, it's a difficult geography to deal with, but we're pretty happy with the 53 subregions that we've divided the UK into, which are akin to city regions. And that does help because we don't have information on residents, only workplace, so there will be commuting to these places from residents. And if we've got areas that are sort of more or less defined on a city region basis, then we're capturing quite a lot. I mean, the residences will be in the same sub-region as the workplace in most cases. The other limitation of GOS, of course, is it's a survey. It's a pretty impressive response rate. It's over 50%, around 50% anyway. People have wondered whether it's biased, but HESA doesn't think it's biased, certainly not enough to reweight its results, which it publishes in unweighted form. And this data set has been used by many academic and policy studies, as has its predecessor. Before GOS, it was the Levers survey, which only was done after 6 months, that's right, after graduation, whereas this is 15 months after graduation for job. So our sample is UK domiciles, starting a degree course by the age of 20, By age 21, they're thought of as mature students, anyone age 21 and above when they're starting their degree courses. And we wanted to focus, as in the previous paper, on school leavers, essentially. So this could include a gap year as well. And they do have to be in work 15 months after graduating. So as we mentioned later, perhaps they do miss people who have gone into full-time postgraduate study. Also, we're taking 2 years to get a bigger sample. This is the graduates of 2018 and 2019, the latest ones that are available for us. 2019, of course, does stray into COVID territory, in the sense that the survey was undertaken in October 2020 about their job details, etc., location then. But in fact, the two data sets for the 2 years pre-COVID and in COVID are very similar. And so we don't think there was any significant distortion by this. Right, now we're going to look at 3 maps which show the move to university, the move from university to workplace, and then the net result of comparing the workplace numbers with the home numbers where they originally came from. And in this here, we're using the same ratio approach as in the previous paper I've been talking about. Ratio of numbers at university compared to the ratio of numbers at domicile. You can see here the geography we've got. They are mainly counties in England, and then grouped council areas in Wales together, and similarly in Scotland to get areas. Each area needs to have at least one university in it, basically, for this to work. So that's why we've done it. We've treated Belfast, Northern Ireland, as a single area for this purpose. Now, the pattern shows where most students, places that gain most students, and they're the ones in red. So you've got these are the ones which been the largest gain ratio of university numbers to home numbers. It's actually highest for Nottinghamshire. Nearly 3 times as many people are studying in Nottinghamshire as where the graduates that were coming out of school and going to become university students. And then the lowest ratio is for Suffolk, and the next one after that is Highlands and Islands, which have very small higher education presence. And so they lose out as a result of this process. It's a fairly predictable pattern based on the location of large universities and the main student generating areas, particularly around the southeast here, which lose out. Now, this is the next stage. This is the return leg, if you like, of the going away to university process. It's the onward movement rather than the return movement, although there is elements of return movement. You can see that the biggest gainers between university numbers and workplace numbers 15 months after graduation are some of the places that got stripped out so much by the going away to university. So once again, at the opposite end from where they were before, Suffolk lost nearly all of its people, but just had a small number of university at university there, and that provides a very small denominator for the numbers that were there for work, and so that's why it's high up in red, and similarly with Highlands and Islands, a degree of return. But as we'll see on the next slide, this is the net effect of going away to university and then moving on to workplace. And it's a very clear pattern. You've got London and Bristol, which have gained 50% or more as a result of this potentially two lots of migration. And then the other 15 who are gainers from this whole process, they're the core cities around Newcastle, Tyneside, which includes Northumberland for the city region basis. The conurbations here, Oxford and Cambridge, capital cities of Cardiff and Edinburgh, and one or two, and Glasgow here, Dundee, Dundee and Aberdeen. And then all the light blue ones are those that have lost out in the process. And it's weakest for Highlands and Islands, almost 50% loss of people. The numbers working there after graduating, only about half the numbers that came from there and went to university. 2/3, 36 out of 53 of the areas, subregions lost out from this process. So once again, still a concentration effect even after graduation. And it's not just about their own school leavers, but also their attractiveness to those leaving school in the rest of the UK, as we proceed to show now as we move on to a rather more technical element of this presentation. Now, the aim here is to work out what types of migration or migrant these student graduates can be classified into, how they've contributed to the change in the numbers that you've just seen on that previous slide, comparing the workplace numbers with the home numbers before they went to university. So we're going to follow basically the approach that's been used 20 years ago nearly by these two pioneering studies, Ball and Fajian and others. They defined 5 different migrant types in terms of people leaving their home and how they proceeded. First of all, they had non-migrants, and these were people who attended a university in their own home area, home sub-region or whatever you call it, and got a job in the same area. So they didn't move out of their domicile regional area. And if you call the home region A, then it can be classified as being at A at time 1, A at time 2, A at time 3. Then they recognized late leavers. These are people who stayed for university in their home area and then moved away to another region for work, which we'll call B as their second place to live. And their trajectory is A at time 1, A at time 2, but B at time 3. Returners are those who went away to university and then returned to their home area for work, so ABA. University retainees, these are people who went away to university, but they then were retained by the region in which their university lies. How do I get rid of that? There we are. So ABB, and then repeat movers, so those that went away to university and then moved twice, and then moved again to a third region for work, which we'll call C, ABC. So that's if you're looking at the what happened to people living in subregion A. That's their home area. What happened to them afterwards and how you calculate it. that. But I want to do migration accounts for each subregion. So for that purpose, we not only look at the domiciles of the subregion and what happened to them, but we also have to take account of the people who arrived in subregion A from other places, either to attend university or to get a job. And this is why in our accounting system, we have 8 types of people: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And in these accounts, these first 2 are ones that are kept by the subregion. They either stayed for university and work, or they went away to university and then came back for work. So they've been kept by university. In our full national sample, just over 20% were non-migrants, didn't move subregion at all. 31, nearly a third, went out of their subregion to university and came back home for work afterwards. So they were kept by their subregion. These next 3 are lost by the subregion. In this case, they stayed for university but went away to work after that. University retainees, they went away to university and stayed in their university subregion. And then a repeat mover, they moved to university and then they went on to a third area for work. But these ones are the ones that they gained from other places, from the rest of the UK. So in this case, we have people who are living in a different subregion and studied in their own home subregion, but then moved to A for work. University retainee, this is in B, and they moved to A to go to university, and then they stayed in A for work. And then repeat movers are ones that started somewhere else in the UK, moved to somewhere else in the UK for university, and then moved to A for work. So you've got 8 different ingredients for the, if you like, migration accounts for these areas. Now I'm going to add some data to this in the next slide to illustrate this. And we'll start with Highlands and Islands, this is, and this is the one which suffered the worst net loss of this cohort, these 2 cohorts combined together, between domicile and workplace. You can see in our sample, 1,400 or so were in our graduate sample, and they managed to keep 495 of them, either because they went to university in the Highlands and Islands, or they went away somewhere else and returned to Highlands and Islands for work. So just about a third were kept by the Highlands and Islands, which meant that 2/3, 64.8%, were lost completely because they went off and stayed somewhere else for work. And those are the patterns that they revealed. But these are ones that gained. The 230 domicile other subregions who came here to work, and that's their composition in terms of the types of move that they made based on the other chart. Net loss of 680, so they 52% was the workplace number, 52% of the original number of 1,400 that they started with. So that's the Highlands and Islands, which lost out most severely out of our 53 subregions. At the other end, I imagine you won't have any doubt in knowing which subregion was at the other extreme. This is Greater London, and that's the domicile number, 32, and going to university in our graduate sample. And you can see that they did actually keep a considerable amount, but more of the ones that they kept went out somewhere else to university and then came back. So that was almost 50%, much higher than the sort of just under a third national standard returners. And then what did they lose? Sorry. They lost only 6,000, they're just under 1/5 of the original 32,000. But this is the impressive thing, as you will have expected. They gained 29,000, i.e. they almost doubled their original domicile number. Obviously, taking out the ones that they lost gives a net increase of 23,000, or 72% up on the original number that they had. And you can see that by far the most significant component of these 8 components of migration change are people that were repeat movers. They weren't Londoners to start with, but they did move to another sub-region which wasn't London for university, and then they moved to London for work. So that added, 2/3 to the original number. Okay, so that's the 2 extremes. What I've done here is use k-means cluster analysis, something that Andrew Hind is very familiar with, I know. And we applied, basically we did these calculations for all the 53, just as I've shown you for Highlands and Islands and London. And calculated all those percentage values on the 8 migration types for each of these subregions. Cluster analysis was then applied to see how the 53 subregions split up, or how much they were similar to each other. We did various numbers of clusters for k-means. The 6-way cluster, which is shown here, is the cleanest that we found. And you see the result. I've arranged the clusters in order of the workplace number as a percentage of the domicile number. And you just saw now that London was up 72% workplace over its domicile number, and that came out as a single region by itself. Then Bristol, Avon, Bristol, Bath, and in Avon and Nottinghamshire grouped together here as the next biggest gaining cluster. And then the yellow ones on the map are basically metropolitan counties or similar. You've got the Cardiff and Edinburgh as well, and Aberdeen and Dundee, and Birmingham here. So Birmingham with Warwickshire in this case, as the next group. And then these next 4 groups, 3 groups, are the ones that lost out from the whole process in net terms. Glasgow and Belfast, Northern Ireland, grouped together. Oxbridge and these grouped with the suburban counties, I call them, wealthier suburban counties, and Cheshire in relation to Manchester. And then the ones that lost out the most between domicile and workplace 15 months after graduation are essentially rural and peripheral. There are 29 of these altogether, so more than half the 53 are in that one category, which share very similar characteristics across the 8, the relative importance of the 8 migrant types that we're looking at. These are the centroids for the 6 clusters, just to give you an idea of how important each of the 8 types of migrant are. We've seen London already, so that's the plus 72 at the bottom. And then, as I mentioned, Avon and Nottingham was the next highest, 39% change it up from its domicile number, 12% for the Mets. And then the losses here, 11% loss for Glasgow and Northern Ireland is a centroid between them. 17% loss for what I call the suburb, which includes Oxford and Cambridge. And then this 30% loss for the 29, the centroid for the 29 rural peripheral subregions. And the ones that are shaded in green are the ones that are more important than the national average. So the non-migrants, 22%. London has more than the average share of non-migrants, people who studied in their home area and stayed in London for work. And the Mets are about the same as well. Glasgow and Northern Ireland really are very distinctive with the the proportion of people who didn't go out of their sub-region to university. They stayed there for university and they got a job there afterwards. And so that gives you an idea of the relative importance of the different elements of these migration accounts for these student graduates. Now that's the numerical side, quantitative side, if you like to call it. We did two exercises in trying to assess the qualitative impact of this migration in terms of the quality of the graduates involved. And we selected two variables. One is before they went to university. As I said, he collects the information before university. And for that, we used their school qualifications. It's called the average Tariff Score, which measures the school qualifications of those who went away to university and became graduates. In this case, we have to exclude Scotland because their different examination system gives them a completely out of kilter ATS. But what you see here is at domicile, London doesn't really score very high of 359. It's way below the total for the 46 non-Scotland subregions. And it's these rural and suburban ones that score highest in terms of school qualifications. But when you come to workplace 15 months after graduation, you can see that the pattern is quite different, with London way ahead of the average, and some of these other ones below average. But that's a change that is wrought by this migration to university and then on to work. London benefiting hugely in terms of the percentage point difference in the ATS between domicile and workplace, and the rural and peripheral losing out most in terms of the fall in the quality of people who are there at workplace compared with those who came out of school there in our sample. So that's one qualitative measure. The other one is obviously we've followed through the preschool qualifications to the graduation in this analysis. In this case, we've got their standard occupational classification 15 months after graduating, and we've taken off the top 1, 2, and 3 major groups, which are the managerial, professional, associated professional work. We have imputed their final graduation, their final work classification onto them at their domicile, backdated it, if you like to call it. And here again, you see that London school leavers who went on to get their degrees and then a job, just about the same proportion of them as the national average are in these top 3 occupational groups. But when you move to workplace, it goes up considerably, a 7.8 percentage point difference and 11% change in that. And you go down here and you see that it works, the a pretty regular descent down. And basically, when we summarize these results, what we're talking about is adding these two qualitative measures to the change in numbers, the quantitative measures that we originally talked about. And we see how much the qualitative side, the human capital side, compares with the purely numerical side. Something called a double whammy for these areas, because they not only lose out most people, but given the people that are left, say the 70% that are still net left in rural and peripheral, they are lower quality, you call it, of lower human capital on both these measures, school performance and the type of job that they're working in. So that gives you an idea of the sort of approach we've got. Is it any use? I enjoy doing it, but is it any use? Well, we think so, because there are implications for the different types of places that we've recognized out of a cluster analysis. You've got the rural and left behind areas with limited university presence and fewer higher status job opportunities, the sort of educating out process that higher education related migration produces, and reinforcing the sort of low skill equilibrium trap. What are the policy implications? Well, hopefully there's scope for improving both the higher education provision, but perhaps even more so the further education provision in these sorts of areas, rural and left behind areas. And maybe they could also emulate the wealthier suburbs in attracting more high-skill work, trying to get out of that trap anyway. London, of course, in a scene of its own, a huge magnet, strong return of its own domiciles that have gone away to university, as well as being the prime destination for repeat movers starting out elsewhere, and exacerbating regional inequality in schools and driving uneven development. Maybe the pressures that result in London will deter, or at least prompt earlier stepping off the escalator, sort of thinking in terms of the Fielding regional escalator that was the southeast of England in his original work. And then you've got the regional conurbations, policy implications here, the METs, the conurbations. They already gain more on average from elsewhere, especially in retaining those moving to study there, but not to the same degree as even or not. And perhaps how can we get these up to the sort of same performance? They're not going to make the London level of performance, but could they get up to the Avon and Nottingham level of performance? Could they be made more attractive for repeat movers by developing better links, the universities providing better links with local firms, for instance? Related research reveals that non-migrants average poorer school outcomes and job status. So more generally, how to enhance the prospects of those people who don't go to university, as well as those who go to university with poorer qualifications. Should they be encouraged to actually go to university somewhere else rather than stay locally for their university? Is a sort of policy question. It's certainly of interest to universities that are trying to increase their intake, enrollment, and competition for their places. Finally, scope for further research. Well, there's obviously more detailed analysis of sub-regional patterns of moving and staying that would be possible by reference to some of the other variables in the HESA dataset, which do include gender and ethnic group, social background of their parents, and so on. Could engage in multivariate analysis to examine the drivers of leaving and staying, analyzing these migrant types against a range of individual, institutional, economic, and geographic variables. Within each sub-region, particularly the larger ones, which have a mix of universities, we could actually compare how the universities in a single sub-region, how they compare in relation to those 8 account types. We only go 15 months beyond graduation, which is the end of the GOS. We'd have to use other data sets to trace how far they went on after this, how they proceeded. The longitudinal educational outcomes data set is administrative data set, which could be used for this. And also there's the census-based longitudinal studies, which I've used in the past as well, the England one, the Scottish one, and the Northern Ireland one. And perhaps investigate the long-term impact of rising migration, in my background at the beginning, towards this new migration regime. Is it going to affect, as time goes on, is it going to reorder when people move during their life course, and perhaps the spatial patterns of their movement in the life course, anticipating what might be necessary to put into population projections in the future for this very tricky but very important element of the whole migration system of the country. That's it. Thank you very much.